Hey everyone, Kim here. Oh, this is going to be a good one. A really good one because I'm totally honored to have this guest on, and he's extremely busy with his schedule and everything else that's going on that I'm just honored that he took time out of his extremely busy schedule. He's out there promoting his new book. He's been on shows and just doing all sorts of stuff. So I'll introduce him in a minute. Okay. Next thing, as always, we're going to get into some house cleaning issues. So go ahead, if you are now clicking the link and you're not signed in, I need you to do that. So go ahead and sign in or sign up to Rumble. It's free. Then once you do that, you want to go ahead and do the following. Subscribe, share, and as always, give us a Rumble. Okay. So for those who know that I am self-taught on everything that I do. And that's another reason I want comments and all that good stuff. So I have found out all sorts of new things to do with a green screen. And I can't wait to show you guys what I have planned. Okay, so enough of that bibble babble. Two things. What I want to do first is introduce this week's mug. All right, guys, so I've used this mug before. I've actually used it quite a few times here on Live Clips, but I haven't used it recently. But it's very fitting for today's episode. So today's episode, the mug is going to be the Rapture mug. Is it biblical truth or Darby fiction? Just kidding. So anyway, this right here is this week's mug, and I really like it. So it's got little scripture verses on it. So we are so close, guys. It could be today. But I'm going to enjoy my coffee because this is a late night recording. That, my friends, is some good coffee. And I'm going to need it because it's going to be a late night. All right. So the second thing I want to do before I mention who the guest is I want to go ahead. And as you guys know, I always seem to wear black. But it's not the same shirt. I promise you. I go to overweargear.com, as you can see here, and they have all sorts of different shirts. Now listen, Matt does not ask me to do this. I do it on my own. I love the quality of the shirts. I love the comfortability of the shirts. I love all the sayings that are on the shirts. So what I'm wearing here tonight is... You guys have seen me wear the Christ over culture. But anyway, so these are just some of the narratives that they have. So the truth over trend, what I'm wearing currently. Faith over fear, grace over guilt, love that shirt. Hope over hype, gospel over gossip, courage over compromise, and that's the other one that I bought along with this one. Worship over worry, service over status, and they come in black, white, or gray, all different sizes. So again, I do wear black often because, as you can see there, I'm not a skinny mini, so it tends to slim me on the camera a little bit. But please head over to overwear, that's one word, overweargear.com, and pick yourself up a shirt. It's a status. And then Matt and I was inboxing him, letting him know that I'm getting more shirts. And I feel like I need a discount code every time. But anyway, and then sometimes I don't ask for a discount code because, well, I mean, they need to make a living too. So with that being said, I asked Matt, he needs to put some prophecy up there. So Mr. Matthew Mayer, listen, bro, you need to put some prophecy stuff because I'd buy it all. I'd buy every single one of them. All right, so let me just get to it here today. I am so honored, like I said, to have on Pete Garcia. He is the co-author of this amazing book that I bought with Terry James. And we're going to dissect this book here today, guys. We're going to talk about a few things and, what is happening? Is this really true? Like, are people really just going to disappear one day? Okay, so this is my intro. I'm going to go ahead and end with that. I think I've covered everything. So as always, go ahead, subscribe, share, comment, please, guys. Give Pete an amazing, amazing hello, a Life Clips podcast. Hello. Hi, Pete. Hello, hello, hello. Lots of thumbs up. but I'm excited to have him here. So enough of me babbling. Let's bring on Pete Garcia. Join us every Friday for encouragement, freedom, and biblical truth. Grab your coffee or grab your tea. It's going to be a good one. Hey everyone, Kim here. So as I already said in my intro, I am so excited to have Pete Garcia, co-author. I have this book ready. I felt like I was a gunslinger. Right here, guys, you have to get this book. I was telling Pete before we started recording that I just couldn't put this thing down. I honestly could not. There's a couple of books that I've really enjoyed in my day, and the breakdown of this book is phenomenal. So before we get into my Q&A and just things that I have that I'm going to read out of this book, let my family members know exactly who you are. And I don't know, floor is yours right now.
So I'm Pete Garcia. I am the founder of the Rev310.net ministry. I wrote for the Omega Letter for a number of years, and the Omega Letter was founded in, I think, 2001. Jack Kinsella was the owner and content creator and founder and all that for that. He brought me on in 2011. I wrote for them through 2018. Jack passed in 2013. And so the family asked, we kept it, we, the writers, we kept the website going for the family as a source of income for a little while. It was about 5 years. We kept it going. And at about 2018, they're like, okay, hey, we're done. If you guys want to take over the website, do whatever you want to do, you can. But so at that point, I branched out and started my own website, which was daunting because I've never owned my own website. I've never managed one. And I tried to go through WordPress and I found that to be very maddening because of all the code and stuff that you have to do on there. Mm-hmm. So I ended up changing over to a new platform and changed the website address from a .com to .net and been loving it ever since. So the platform I'm on now, I can manage it myself. I don't have to ask anybody for help, which is really, really beneficial for me in time, as far as time goes. And then, but beyond that, I was in the Army for 22 years. I was a medevac pilot, flew Blackhawks from about 2004 to 2016, 2017. Mm-hmm. And in the last few years in the military, I was mostly just like a program manager. So that's kind of it. I'm married. I have 5 kids, beautiful wife, beautiful kids. It's a busy life. And you just, find time when you can to write down. I write down little ideas here and there, or something will trigger a thought in my head, and I'll write it down. And then later, when I get some alone time, I'll go and hammer out an article. And sometimes those come out really quick, and sometimes they take weeks and weeks to kind of fine tune and get them exactly the way I want to put them. But that's been my life, since 2011. So wow. I've tried to write at least one article a week since 2011, and been pretty good at it so far.
That's good. And honestly, I am honored that you're here. I know you're extremely busy, so I do appreciate that. It's a heart full of gratitude. So I really do appreciate you being here, taking time out of your chaotic schedule. So we're going to dive right in. So guys, we have a lot to go over today. So before I dive into this book, I do want to ask you, we've all had Rapture books and people have written different books. I personally have read different books. So how is this different? Like, how is this one different than other ones that we would find on Amazon.com or Barnes and Nobles?
So I think, first of all, when I had my conversion back in 2007 timeframe. Like most people, were really searching for what is the truth, and I had the come to Jesus moment. I had this kind of changed life, and then from there I began to search. Right, I began to search for what is true, and that's where I came across the Omega letter. The way that Jack taught was very down to earth. He could take very complex ideas and simplify it in ways that I can understand it, but not lose any of the context or any of the significance of the whatever the issue was.
Mm-hmm.
And same with Chuck Missler. I really cut my teeth under him, and I think Clarence Larkin. Once I started to get grounded in kind of what was Orthodox Christianity, what was true, I kind of moved on. And Clarence Larkin, that's still my favorite book, the book on dispensationalism, is just, it takes you to a whole nother level, like just deep dives into so many things. Now, I think what's unique about this particular book then is that you have myself and you have Terry James coming in, who I believe is the co-founder for Rapture Ready. So both of us have kind of established backgrounds in pre-trib community. We've been consistent over all these years. So you could look back at stuff. I've looked back at stuff I've written in 2011, and I haven't changed my views on those things because I haven't had to. Some guys are continually updating, or they're going back and doing things like that. They're changing positions, or redefining what they meant back then. And I don't have to do that, because I learned under good mentors and good teachers then who stuck to the Bible. They stuck to the historical, grammatical, literal interpretation of the Bible. That's what I hold to. And I would add even the future. So you have literal, grammatical, historical, and then I would put future in terms of most of eschatology is there's still a lot left that has not yet been completed. So you have that. You have the two name brand, call myself name brand, but two well-established writers. We both wanted to tackle issues that were controversial and surrounding the rapture, things that tend to divide even pre-trib people. We wanted to put in a fictional narrative that just put a story behind it, interweaved in between the nonfiction sections, so that for somebody that wasn't really that read up on it, they could kind of see it, how it might play out. And then we go way beyond the rapture. Obviously, we go in the gap between the rapture and the start of the 70th week. And then we go through the 70th week and break down all the seal, trumpet, bowl judgments. And then what comes after that. So I think it's a fairly comprehensive book. It's not long. It's not a long book. And my style of writing is very easy to read. So I don't know. It's just different, and it's simple. We wanted something that had enough information. My thought process in this stemmed from an article that I wrote, many months before that, called Rules for Remnant. And it was a 1-page article that you could print front and back. And it had everything. If you were left behind, if you had this one sheet of paper, it would tell you everything that was going to happen and kind of walk you through the next 7 years if you were stuck on Earth during that time. And I didn't want, I figured if you're in that situation, you're not going to have libraries of books. You're not going to have access to the internet. You're not going to have a lot of things. You may only have one book. You may have the Bible, and you may have this one little sheet of paper that's printed on both sides, and you can just take it with you, pray in it, or have it printed already, and there you go. I mean, it will be a guide for people. And so that was kind of the heart behind this book, was doing just that.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because, and I didn't want to give it away, but again, that's what I found different from the book. Is normally it's just, okay, you start at A and it ends at B. But you brought in this storyline because when I first started reading it, I'm like, wait a second. And then I'm like, oh, okay. But I didn't want to give that away. So guys, there is a nice little, I like it. A nice little thing here in this book, and you got to go out there and purchase it, because it's really good. So I'm going to be quoting some from your book today. I hope that's okay. And I've put my little markers and my flags. I need to put on my readers because I'm at that age. But I want to read here first on page 30 and 31. And it says, "But what if the validity of the rapture depended on how fantastical it appeared? Why do many reject it for that reason? When in the same breath, they defend a 6-day creation. Why do they do with Adam, Eve, and a talking serpent? What do they do, with Adam, Eve and a talking serpent, Noah and the global flood, Israel's supernatural exodus out of Egyptian bondage, David and Goliath, Jonah and the whale, Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead, Jesus' own resurrection. You see, if you discount one thing, you would pretty much have to discount the rest, since they are all quite bizarre and intertwined into a singular story. If the rapture is not truly simply due to how irrational it sounds, then none of the aforementioned can be true either. The rapture highlights Christ's crowning achievement of not only conquering sin, death, and hell by his death, burial, and resurrection, but in creating and taking the church that he himself built. So my question to you here for that one is, why do you think the church, people don't believe in the rapture anymore? I feel like there's such a small remnant now. Why do you think that is?
Well, this is kind of a long answer. Essentially, the first 3 centuries in the church history, from the apostles and the disciples of the apostles through the early church fathers. So from the time of, say, Paul all the way up through just before Augustine before Constantine legalized Christianity in 313 AD, the majority view was Chiliasm, which is that they believed in that Christ would return and there would be 1,000-year kingdom on the earth. Now, John hadn't written yet the Revelation, which he got around 95 AD in Paul's day. So Paul, there are still things left to be unveiled, so to speak. So the disciples even didn't have a full understanding. And Peter, when talking about Paul, in 2 Peter 3, he says that Paul writes things hard to be understood. And that some people, unstable people twist, and then you have the ignorant people, just don't understand. And then he has these 2 categories of ignorant and then the unstable begin to twist these things, right? What Paul was speaking on. So, but the majority of Christendom during those first 3 centuries were premillennial. They believed that Christ would physically and literally return and establish his kingdom. Now, around the time that Constantine legalized Christianity, you have this kind of big transition where instead of the church going out into the world began to come into the church. Now these temples that were pagan began to convert over to Christians. The priests that were pagan priests began to convert into Christian priests. But when they were coming over and during this transition period, a lot of that baggage came over with it. And there became this kind of politically incorrect idea. We know that as Christians, we just have this kingdom. They're no longer, throwing us in the arena with the lions. They're not, lighting us like torches along paths. They're not crucifying us. They're not doing all these things anymore. Maybe we need to tone down this whole kingdom idea. And I think that's where Augustine comes in. And Augustine was influenced by a guy named Origen. And these are guys that began to take non-literal approaches to the scripture. So instead of looking at the Revelation 20, where it mentioned that there's a 1,000-year kingdom 6 times, he's like, well, that, and I'm paraphrasing here. He's like, that's not really a real kingdom. And he's talking, it's not really 1,000 years. That's really Christ is ruling and reigning right now. And this is not meant to be taken literally. So Augustine sets the foundation for doctrinally speaking, for the Roman Catholic Church. Most of what the Roman Catholic Church teaches on in terms of its foundational doctrines and dogmas comes from Augustine. So from about the 4th, 5th century through the 15th century, through the Reformation, you have where Roman Catholicism really dominates Western civilization. And by dominating Western civilization, they become the dominant force within Christendom in terms of power, authority. And you have remnant churches and you have true Bible-believing churches that exist, but they're few and far between, and they're scattered about small communities. So it's not that God doesn't have his people, he does. But there were a few pockets, pre-tribulation belief goes all the way back through Eusebius and Ephraim, the Syrian. So there's pre-trib early church and then anti-Nicene church fathers. So it didn't die off, in the year 313, and we don't hear anything about the pre-trib rapture until Darby comes along, in the 1800s. That's not true. There's always been pre-trib folks. They just haven't been the dominant voice in Christendom. So during the Reformation, you have Martin Luther posts his 95 thesis on the door in the church in Wittenberg, and he begins this breakaway from the Catholic Church. And they broke away on a lot of the doctrinal issues regarding salvation and the nature of the church and things like that. But they took with it, these reformers took with them the eschatological baggage from the Roman Catholic Church, which at this point in time was what we would call amillennialism. They didn't believe there was a literal kingdom that was coming. There wasn't a literal Christ that was returning. And so even if you look at the Pope, why do Roman Catholics have a Pope? Well, the Pope's title is the Vicar of Christ, and vicar means to rule vicariously. So this man is ruling vicariously for Christ on the earth in Christ's place. So now what he says when he sits on the chair, his golden throne, whatever it is, he speaks ex cathedra, or is it? I forget the title of it. I think it's ex cathedra or something. I'm blanking on the name right now.
I'm not good with big words. You'll find that in some of these passages I read today.
Well, when he speaks, it's supposed to be from the mouth of God himself. So he is speaking like a prophet, thus saith the Lord. So when he sits on his chair and he gives out his papal dogmas, it's as if God is speaking. So that gave him a lot of authority. Well, by the time Martin Luther comes along, the indulgences, the inquisitions, and all the things that had been really just corrupting the church at that point, was things that was driving Martin Luther away. But unfortunately, he took with him this Roman Catholic eschatology of amillennialism. So that transferred over to these newly forming Protestant churches like the Lutherans, the Presbyterians, Anglicans, the major denominations, right, that came out of that, all kind of held to this amillennial perspective. And it was that way until about the 1700s. And then by the 1700s, there's a shift again. We have the First Great Awakening, and you have people like Cotton Mather and other preachers that were coming out that were big names that were beginning to promote a pre-tribulation rapture. So, 60 years before Darby existed, or, before Darby came out and began teaching his thing, you had other pastors and folks coming out. And there's a whole bunch of them. I think it was Thomas Ice that had his book, Dispensationalism Before Darby. And so he quotes folks, going back hundreds and hundreds of years that had this pre-trib dispensational point perspective. Now, the unique thing about what Darby did was Darby didn't invent dispensationalism. He didn't invent the pre-trib rapture. What Darby did was he codified what was already in existence, what was already out there. He kind of systematized it and put it in a way that people could understand it. And so that he didn't invent it any more than Martin Luther invented salvation by grace through faith. I mean, salvation by grace through faith has always been in the Bible, but it's something that had been discarded or ignored by the Roman Catholic Church for millennia. And so Martin Luther didn't invent it. He just rediscovered what was there. Same with Darby. He didn't invent dispensationalism. He just rediscovered what's always been there.
Correct. So, that's a great analogy.
Churches today have largely, it's kind of come and gone, in waves, right? Where there's a big prophecy movement, interest in Bible prophecy. We saw that in the 70s with the late great planet Earth, and then the Jesus movement. And then it kind of dies off because people get complacent, and that's with everything, right? And complacency is like that ever-present mold or rust that if you're not diligent about it, begins to expand and grow, and just it grows in the shadows, right? And before you know it, the whole thing is kind of taken over. Yeah. So pastors today, even within Baptist, churches, which traditionally were pre-trib, have been seduced by the Reformed theology because it sounds smart. It sounds, like you have these really educated guys coming out and using a lot of big words, and they're THDs and PhDs, and people are kind of oohed and awed about how well they're presenting and speaking. They think, well, this has got to be true because, so-and-so, he's such an eloquent speaker and such an educated guy. And they get wooed by that, but it's not true. The Reformed theology is no more true than preterism. And there are points of agreement that we can have with all these different views. And I know that people want to dissect Christian orthodoxy into like, okay, here's the core. We can't move on this, like the deity of Christ or the Trinity. There's these secondary issues, where the Bible is the inerrant word of God, or communion and baptism. And then you have these tertiary issues where things that we can agree to disagree on. And I think that that has become the default position for most churches today, where they are afraid to go out and say what they're going to say. Even if the pastor is pre-trib, he doesn't want to teach on it because he doesn't want to offend his parishioners and lose church members going to different churches. But I think that that's almost a death knell for churches, because when you begin to avoid teaching a third of your Bible, you end up just rehashing these same old sermons over and over, and nobody's growing. And when you quit growing, you begin to die. Yeah.
The prophecy won't really bring in a huge amount of not only probably money, but people. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, the world's not going to be around much longer. And I don't know. I mean, even talking to my mom, sometimes it's watching people within the church. It can be a little like, what are you talking about? Kim, this world's always been this way. Why does it make it any different today? So
yeah, and it definitely brings out a particular, I don't figure out how to say this politically. It can bring out a whole wide range of people. So I had just an article I wrote the other day that just blew up. Like I've never had an article that big. 40,000 views. And I mean, the most views I've ever had on an article before was about 13,000. And even then I was like, wow, that's big. This is 40,000. And I'm thinking, good grief. And now out of the woodwork, you've got people coming out from every position, trying to promote their website, trying to promote their pre-wrath or post-trib, and I'm just like, hey man, this is 100% pre-trib. You're not going to come on here promoting those things. I'm just going to boot you. I don't even have time to like argue with you anymore. Yeah, I've got 600 articles on here. If you want to go through them, they're chock full of proof and evidence. But yeah, so pastors obviously are cautious of they don't want to deal with that. They don't want to deal with all the craziness. But at the same time, you can't avoid it because the world has gone insane right now.
It has. And how do you answer those questions? I mean, people are wanting to know, and I think it's a great door to open to invite that conversation. I know I Uber part-time, and sometimes it's just an amazing thing when I hear them talking about the world, and it's a door that, I'm like, don't think I'm crazy. And then they're like, what? And I'm like, well, and then I'll start talking and they're like, I've heard that before. So let me ask you something. It says here on, so page 39, one thing about me that I, just so you know, and I'm laughing, but my podcast, it did not start out the way that it's kind of morphed into, but I firmly believe that I do agree a new world order is coming. I believe in the global reset and all of that, but I feel like sometimes our focus is so NWO that we're not new age order, as I call it, because it's clear in Revelation 17, the Antichrist rides a religious system at the first half because he comes with a pseudo peace. Plus, I believe the big spin that's going to be when the rapture happens is actually what you had said here. So I want to read just 2 paragraphs here. And it says here, quote, page 39, moreover, just as terrifying and horrific as life will become on planet Earth after the rapture, there will be those who seek to profit from all the chaos and confusion. Even now, these individuals and organizations are preparing for the crisis they know is coming, but don't know when, how, or even what it is, which is true. Thankfully, this is where Satan is in a real bind. He needs his human minions to prepare for what is coming, the perfect crisis. However, he cannot tell them why exactly. They are preparing without losing them to the enemy camp, and then you have God's side. That is why he has spent the last 100 years conducting an extensive and relentless psychological operation upon the earth. I'm smiling because this is so true. Spinning ideas like UFOs, Gaia, aliens, superheroes, supervillains, global warming, the multiverse, and now the metaverse, and so forth through books, television, and movies. I added the metaverse, by the way, guys. That's not in the book. He needs everybody believing the rapture is something other than what it really is. I love this here. Divine deliverance. I've never heard anyone say that before. So he needs the world to be distracted from what is coming. Satan does all of this while knowing the truth that the rapture will trigger the events necessary for the arrival of his final kingdom. After the rapture, he knows he has very little time before his own judgment. So what do you think? Again, when I heard you talking with Tom Hughes, when he asked, we're not date setters, and you were like, soon, the rapture's going to happen soon. But Again, we don't know, but do you think it's going to be an alien UFO spin? Do you think it's going to be, what do you think? I believe it's going to be like that CE5. You've heard of CE5 meditation with Dr. Stephen Greer,
No.
Demi Lovato. So they go to like Joshua Tree and they kind of invoke the aliens, but they're really invoking demons. So they have communications with aliens, and then like the solar flash. So you've heard all of these people that believe that, the solar flash is going to happen. And then they use, believe it or not, a quarter of the earth will be raptured, but not like a biblical rapture. So what do you think this spin's going to be?
I was talking to LA he was talking with who it was, like Nathan Jones, me, LA, and Mondo Gonzalez, and we were just sitting around talking, and I came into the conversation. They're talking about UFOs, and I said, these guys are all way smarter than I am on the subject. I just said, I look at it from a very simple standpoint, that a global level problem, a global level crisis, is going to require a global level distraction. So when the rapture happens, and I believe that not only will Christians be taken, but children from all over the world, that this is going to throw the world into this huge crisis mode. And at this point, this is where Satan will bring in this distraction. So whether it's like the article that I had recently posted with the zombie apocalypse kill switch, or UFOs, or both, or, there's probably a combination of things that are going to be going on. Mm-hmm. He's going to use that to distract the population that's still here on the earth, aside from all the chaos and craziness that's going to be going on. Mm-hmm. Particularly in urban areas around the world. So I think that's definitely a possibility. But again, I believe a global level crisis requires a global level distraction, and Satan is definitely going to take advantage of that. And when you think back to, and I do think UFOs will be part of this, because when you think back to when Christ was born, you had the angels in the heaven singing, and they were, directing the shepherds to go to where the manger was, and mm-hmm. You have this kind of angelic interaction in the heavens, right? And Satan always mimics everything God does. So Amen. I think that when the rapture happens, there will be this aerial or atmospheric event where these things are going to come out, and they're going to be so visible and so present that people are just going to naturally assume that the two mm-hmm. events are connected, right? That the rapture is connected with these guys arriving, and perhaps that's how they spin part of it. Yeah. But here's the thing. Here's the cool thing. We live in this time right now where the internet's open. I have a website. You have a website. We can talk on interviews, and we can put it on YouTube and Rumble and places like that. And we are given this small window of time where the technology has allowed us. It's like almost like a fourth great awakening, where we're pushing out this information about the prophecy. Even going back, if you want to start from, say, Hal Lindsey, the late great Planet Earth, up through the Left Behind series, up through the internet, these folks that have come out, J.D. Farag, Tom Hughes, all of these folks that are getting hundreds of thousands of views and are bringing so many people to Christ. God is using this time period to really awaken the general population. So I remember years ago in San Antonio, when I was stationed there, they had a bunch of birds falling out of the sky that were dying off. And this was like 2010, 2009, 2010, somewhere. And the meteorologist was talking about this. And on the news at night, at the 10 o'clock news, he's like describing all these birds just mysteriously dying all over the place. And he's like, somebody get me the book of Revelation. So even non-Christians are attributing a lot of the craziness they're seeing to the apocalypse, or to Armageddon, or to Revelation. And they don't understand those concepts from a biblical standpoint, but they know they're associated with like the last days. Correct. And so even those folks, I think, understand that life right now is not normal. Life is becoming increasingly unnormal. And there are things that are starting to happen that just are defying our understanding of reality. So, correct. I think that absolutely, yes, there'll be a global level distraction. To answer, it's a long way of answering your quite short question. Yeah, no, I agree. I do. I mean, again, I'm not going to be here, but my assumption from some of the videos that I've seen throughout my journey of doing starting this podcast and getting, I don't want to say heavily involved, but enough to where I can talk about it, the new age and just other aspects of new age. It's quite disturbing, actually. Okay, so you say on page 41, you talk about a small window of time. You talk about a gap. So I know how I feel, or what I think that gap may be. Can you explain briefly the gap theory, and how many years do you think it'll be, and first of all, what are we talking about when we say gap theory, and then
expand upon that, how long do you think the gap would be?
So the gap is the gap theory. There's one associated with creation between days 1 and the first day of creation and the second day. So this gap theory is really between the rapture of the church and the start of the 70th week of Daniel. So Daniel 9:27 says that the 70th week starts at this covenant that's brought forth by the Antichrist, or the person that will become the Antichrist. But there's no connective tissue between this event and the rapture. There's no correlation between the two. Now, I am of the belief that although the rapture doesn't start the 70th week, it certainly opens the door for it, right? In a way that couldn't be beforehand, because I think it introduces the requisite amount of crisis the world needs to be at in order for this last 7 years to start, for this covenant to kind of come into play. So in terms of length of time, it could be anywhere from, a month or a couple months to 3. I personally believe it's somewhere around 3.5 years. But I only think that because there's a lot of things that have to happen between the rapture and then the start of the 70th week. And there are things that require time. So building a city of Babylon requires time. Mm-hmm. We can build a city fairly quickly these days, but it can't be built overnight. There is time built into that idea.
Have you seen, not to interrupt, but have you seen videos on the current Babylon, what they're doing out there?
A few, yeah.
We finally made it. We're now entering the famous Blue Gate of Babylon, the one I've seen so many times online in movies. It's right in front of me, and you just really start to feel the history of this place. It's really beautiful walking through these gates, and it's kind of empty now, but still have these beautiful palm trees that remain, and the unbelievable gates that exist here. Very, very cool.
You are welcome in Babylon City. Now beside Ishtar Gate.
How old is Babylon?
This civilization King Nebuchadnezzar 600 BC, 2600 years. The area Babylon 10 million square meters.
Are you from Babylon?
Yes.
How does it feel to be from such a historical city?
Me very happy me visiting Babylon. The Babylon, me like the Babylon.
Me like the Babylon
Yes,
too.
very happy.
Everybody like the Babylon.
Yes, big.
Babylon. Babylon. Babylon.
The gate of God.
Let's go dance.
This foundation original. Can you see?
Yeah. How much is underground in Babylon?
90% ما مكتشف.
Over 90% of the city is still underground.
Oh, he's got the key, man.
That's why you were here.
I didn't know that.
This place.
Great. To kill super.
This guy's the boss, dude. He owns the place.
This is part of the video. Sure.
The main god in Babylon, Marduk. The hidden dragon. Why? The god I live everywhere. In the sky, in garden, in cave. This inscription, chloroform.
Inscription? What does it say?
King Nebuchadnezzar, the renewed Marduk temple and the renewed Nabu temple. Can you see this? The joint tar, the material tar, no cement.
Yeah, check this out. What does it say?
Golden Malik Nebuchadnezzar.
Reconstructed this place.
This is original?
Yes.
Original gate, the blue
Yes.
one.
Yes, blue one. That time, this is the street level. One level.
Oh, we're
It's
underground
under.
right now.
Yes. This 14 meter. Now they discovered just 8 meter.
Why is there so many ruins underground still? Why don't you excavate?
Oh, because the Iraqi before war.
Yeah, war.
And you need to protect. Me excavated this, dig this, because you need to protect the building and this.
Beautiful lion behind me of Babylon. It's just stunning to see the original stone sculpture that they found here. They excavated it here, and it's just a wonderful sight to see. It's overlooking the fence, and it's just beautiful. It's so stunning here. The castles, all the palm trees, and the different inscriptions on the walls. Kind of like Egyptian almost. Really just makes you feel like you're walking in the beginning of time. These walls have been standing for God knows how long, and it's kind of like a maze when you walk through here. It just kind of goes on forever. You like it?
I like it so much. I visit it a lot of time.
But as beautiful as Babylon is, there is no effort to preserve it, and it breaks my heart. If this site was in a country like Italy or Egypt, it would attract millions of tourists a year, just like the Colosseum and the pyramids of Giza. But sadly, this place is not built for tourism. There isn't even a functioning bathroom in the area.
Babylon is beautiful, but there is no care from the government. Saddam Hussein rebuilt everything, but something is still real.
On one hand, it's a really special experience to have Babylon all to ourselves, but on the other hand, I wish more people could experience its majesty because trust me, this is one of the most impressive things that our world has to offer. Bro, we've been a lot of places in this world.
A lot of places.
This is up there.
This is, I mean, the ruins is amazing because you have the old ones in the back there, completely, not even unearthed. They're still there.
It's incredible. And Saddam's palace overlooking this entire city. It's like incredible. This is good. It got the old and then the new. And I think having the sunset here, watching it over this old city is something I'll never forget. And the craziest thing is, it's such a historical site. No one's here.
Nobody's here.
Nobody.
Not even locals come here. So really interesting.
Yeah.
And I think, possibly in my fiction book that I wrote, Hobo, in the scenario in that I don't have Babylon in Iraq. I have Babylon where Neom is, where the Saudis are trying to build this giant modernistic city that's built like a straight line, and it basically borders Egypt. It'll connect Egypt, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia together.
Never heard that before.
Yeah, and the reason I call that I call it in the book the New Babylon is because it does fall in the territory of ancient Babylon.
In today's video, we're going to talk about the $500 billion megacity Neom and their future plans. Saudi Arabia has unveiled plans for a series of new cities that are intended to serve as the urban centers of the country's future economy. The kingdom's Future Cities initiative is intended to provide a range of services and amenities to urban residents, including advanced public infrastructure, high-tech education, healthcare, and entertainment. The jewel in the crown of the kingdom's Vision 2030 diversification program is undoubtedly Neom, which will cost an estimated $500 billion to construct alone. In recent years, the kingdom has pursued an economic diversification strategy that has resulted in the development of a wide range of industries and services, including steel, petrochemicals, information technology, and financial services. The Saudi Vision 2030 is a set of policy guidelines and medium-term plans that guide the development of a modern Saudi Arabia over the next decade. The goals of Vision 2030 are to enhance the effectiveness of Saudi Arabia in improving the quality of life for its citizens, increasing the nation's income, and diversify the economy by creating new industries. In 2017, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, announced the launch of the nation's first futuristic and fully automated business zone, Neom. The $500 billion Neom will serve as a center for industries related to the digital economy and will be linked to the country's existing cities by a network of highways, rail, and air transportation. The future city is being designed to maximize the use of renewable energy and employ cutting-edge technologies. The new city, Neom, is named from a combination of the Greek word for new and the Arabic term for future. This high-tech business hub is to be located in the Tabuk province in the northwestern part of Saudi Arabia along the Red Sea coast. The region has been selected in view of its relatively mild climate. Saudi Arabia is a desert country with an extremely hot climate. Most of the country experiences temperatures above 45 degrees Celsius throughout the day. The summer months are the most oppressive for travelers when the heat can often exceed 50 degrees Celsius. The country's desert also experiences extremely oppressive humidity levels throughout the day. The project's total area is slated to be 26,500 square kilometers and will link Jordan and Egypt via Saudi territory. The project is expected to generate 380,000 jobs and contribute $48 billion to the kingdom's GDP by 2030. A glance at the website for the futuristic megacity reveals that Neom is touted to be 33 times the size of New York City. The goal of the project is to demonstrate that the kingdom has the capacity to develop large-scale urban centers that can serve as economic hubs even as it continues to produce a majority of its energy needs through oil and gas. In March 2022, the prince announced that Neom would house Chorjena, an all-year-round ski village, at nearly 2 miles artificial freshwater lake and the vault. It's like a vertical village within the mountain with a fusion of technology, entertainment, and hospitality facilities. Trojena expects to attract 700,000 visitors and 7,000 permanent residents by 2030. It was also claimed that the Trojena project would create 10,000 jobs and add $800 million to the Saudi economy. The first phase of the NEOM project, which is being developed in partnership with a number of global firms, including plans for a number of groundbreaking features. Among the most prominent is the proposed development of a flying drone taxi service that will ferry passengers between the various attractions and entertainment venues that will be located throughout the city. The project's second phase will include plans to construct a Jurassic Park-style amusement park that will include attractions dedicated to the exploration and exhibition of the natural world. The third phase of the project will see the construction of a giant artificial moon that will be illuminated with lights at night. Recently in 2022, the Crown Prince also announced that as part of the NEOM project, a zero-carbon city called The Line would be set up. The Crown Prince labeled the city project as a civilizational plan that puts humans first. The Line is crafted as a linear city for 1 million people, running 170 kilometers long with a width that would be walkable in 5 minutes. The extensive development of plans for NEOM have been welcomed by observers worldwide, who have noted that the first city will serve as a remarkable attraction for visitors from all over the world. The Line is not designed to be a conventional city, but a futuristic one. A city's usual amenities such as schools, hospitals, and gardens will be carefully crafted in view of the residents' expected proclivity towards the availability of top-quality education, health, and recreation. The entire NEOM area, including the Line, will be a free trade zone with its own tax structure and an autonomous legal system. Within NEOM, there would be Oxagon, a city floating on water spanning 7 kilometers, making it the largest floating structure in the world. The city has the potential to be a self-sustaining economic hub. It will have a polycentric urban fabric, with housing, offices, businesses, institutions, and entertainment taking place in different parts of the city. The city will be divided into 3 sections: a technology and innovation district, a creative and cultural hub, and a commercial district. Reports state that the futuristic city NEOM is being built using artificial intelligence and clean energy sources. The planners of the city have said that they would provide bullet trains and a hyperloop for transportation, but residents would be encouraged to use bicycles. The city would run totally on smart city technologies. Robots will play a key role in the areas of security, logistics, home delivery, and provision of care. NEOM will be a regional powerhouse in water production and storage, anchored on water desalination. NEOM's water distribution network will be connected entirely through an advanced Internet of Water infrastructure, delivering high-quality drinking water and recycled water across its network, while removing wastewater. Smart irrigation, leak detection, and water quality monitoring will be controlled in real time. NEOM will be one of the world's leading green hydrogen producers, as it is one of the few places in the world where it can be produced competitively and in large quantities. Saudi Arabia's master plan is to increase non-oil related revenue and attract foreign investment with interesting proposals to stimulate economic growth. The BBC has reported that NEOM City is part of Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 plan to wean the country off oil. However, oil industry made them who they are now. The technological and environmental plans of the zero cars, zero streets, and zero car emissions have drawn the most attention. The city's infrastructure and services will be arranged in 3 layers. The top layer will be the pedestrian layer, supported by 2 underground layers. It will be followed by the service layer of physical infrastructure. And further below the service layer will be the spine layer for transportation. The high-speed transit is being designed to reach people within 20 minutes anywhere in the city. Construction on the project's first phase has already begun. NEOM Bay, some hotel complexes, and luxurious apartments have been completed. In 2019, the NEOM Bay Airport was inaugurated. Construction for a massive complex of palaces for the Saudi king, prince, and royal family members has also been started. With that,
So during those times, this area would have fallen into what used to be ancient Babylon. So it isn't.
Interesting.
it isn't the city that lies between the Tigris and the Euphrates, where we traditionally think it is today. And I think the Tower of Babel itself was probably further north. I disagree. And that's what, I mean, these are things that I can disagree with folks on, and it's not deal breakers, but I tend to believe that the Tower of Babel was built further north, almost in southern Syria, where Syria is today. There's a triangle. I can't remember the name of the triangle of this area, but I think that's where Babel was built. Now, the reason I think it was built there, and how that connects to where Babylon would be built later, is that after the flood, the waters are receding. Noah and his sons are descending out of Mount Ararat. And my understanding is southern Iraq was marshland for millennia. I mean, it didn't even really become desert or dried out until Saddam Hussein dried it out.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so he drained all those areas because there was a bunch of Shia rebels. It was like a Shia rebel holdout down there, and he's trying to clear them all out of there. So he drained those marshes. But for a long time, that used to just be marshland. So where Babylon sits in, say, Daniel's day, even by then, I think it was probably closer to Baghdad than where the ancient site is, where we have remnants of stuff today. I mean, the stuff has been built there over and over for millennia. So
well, as Dr. Andy says, I mean, when we believe different things, we're not going to start a new church over it. So because I do like new theories. I do. I mean, I'm not in just one lane when it comes to things that aren't salvation issues, put it that way, because I am interested in that. The
idea with Babel being further north, I really got that from Answers in Genesis. And I don't know if it was Henry Morris or somebody that's really, learned in creation, just talking about the geological and geographical challenges of having a Babel that far south when that whole area was like marshland and just really it would be really hard to build these massive constructions down there on that kind of land. But I agree with Andy Woods on the Babylon being a literal city. And I think Tom refers to it more as a religious movement. And I don't want to misquote him, but I think we just had this conversation in the last interview. But I think there's a commercial Babylon and there's a religious Babylon. Correct. So however the commercial takes form or shape, I don't know. It could very well be a city, and it's the city that is where everything kind of is. It's the hub for everything, just like New York City is like the hub for the stock exchange and Wall Street and all that. This may be the new hub. But in the book, in my fiction book, I put it in Neom. And it connects those three countries together. So my view is probably way different than anybody else's. So
yeah, I've never heard it before. And also too, a commercial Babylon, just to add, I guess, maybe some more speculation to that. The commerce part of the tribulation really doesn't happen until that last part anyway, if you think about it. Because that's really when that's all being set up, isn't it? I mean, that's how I read it. Yeah. Because that's when the mark is implemented, the buying and the selling, all of that we read is really within those second half parameters. But okay, so the gap, so the building of Babylon, and then what else do you think we need time for? Why do you think there would be a gap?
Gog-Magog war. I think.
So you think, okay, so I know Dr. Andy and other people that I listen to, J.B. Hickson, they believe that that's the second seal, but you believe it comes between the rapture and the beginning of the tribulation?
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, because it takes, I want to say it's in Ezekiel 39, it takes the 7 years. They're burning weapons and things for 7 years. So at the midpoint of the tribulation, they're not going to be concerned with burning weapons. And so that, I'm not to say that it can't be done later. Right. I mean, obviously it could. Yeah. But to me, it just makes sense to have it in the gap. And then out of that Gog-Magog war, you have the arrival of the two witnesses. You have the covenant. Now, so think about it this way. After the rapture of the church, the United States is going to fall apart very quickly. If you take even 30 million people, and that's just using a 10% estimate of current population numbers, if you were to take 10% of the population away, that is going to absolutely destroy our society. Everything is going to fall apart. We're teetering right now on, defaulting and collapsing currencies and everything like that. So it wouldn't take much. So when the United States collapses, there is going to be a power vacuum in the world. I think this is where China, Russia, and the Gog-Magog coalition try to take advantage of that situation, because by this point, Israel is already on tap to provide gas to Europe. So that's already cutting into Russia's money and their prestige and power. Then you have Israel would have already taken out Iran's nuclear capabilities to this strategic strike. So that gives those two nations motivation. And I think for the Turks under Erdogan, this is something he wants for himself. He wants to reclaim the Ottomans' glory and reestablish the Sultanate, and that starts with him recapturing Jerusalem. So I think that all three of them have motivations, and they're all kind of different motivations. The Iranians are Shia, and they want to start this war with Israel so they can invoke the Mahdi to come. The Russians want to take out the Israelis, because now if they take them out, they can take over these huge natural gas fields off their coast, and they're trying to consolidate and rebuild their Russian empire. And the same with the Turks. Turks are trying to rebuild this Turkish, the Ottoman Empire for themselves, right? And then they have the hangers-on, the other nations that kind of join in the fray: Libya, Sudan, and probably a lot of the stand nations that are been armed to the teeth with our current administration.
Yeah.
So that attack right there, I think once God destroys those armies, that leaves another gap, right? I don't know that China will get involved in that conflict. I don't think they will, but they'll still be in China dealing with their own. China will be in this state of collapse as well, because they've been so interlinked with the U.S. economy for so long. When we go down, they're going to go down. But I do think that what happens at this point is that we see a rise in Europe. Europe begins to ascend at this point. And so now Europe becomes, I don't think they're going to be the 10 kings. I think that the 10 kings are kind of a global folks coming from around the world that will come together and form these like regions. But I think they will be the predominant region. And they will be able to negotiate this peace or this deal between Israel and all these other nations. And then that does involve the rebuilding of the temple, which, again, these things take time.
Correct.
But you're not going to have a rebuilding of a temple until the two witnesses show up and can point exactly where the temple needs to go, which cow, red heifer they can use. So there's going to be some things that these two witnesses, I think, will be instrumental in doing with this rebuilding of the third temple.
It almost looked like a scene from the Bible. A group of people performing a special procession for the Jewish holiday of Shavuot, using sheep, a special bread, and a sacrificial altar, similar to the one described in the Torah.
We're practicing the different parts of the priestly work of the Kohanim in the temple. And today we're going to see a few things. We're going to see the Bikurim, all the pilgrimage that come with the first fruit to Jerusalem, how they would bring it, how we would praise God in the temple. And from that point of view, it's also something that the priests have to know how to get the people, and also the people themselves, what they have to say and how they proceed as they get into the temple.
This event gathered different organizations which share the same goal: rebuilding a third Jewish temple on the Temple Mount. It's, of course, a sensitive issue during a geopolitical atmosphere of today, when every small change in the status quo may lead to violence and crisis. The leader of this initiative, Rabbi Baruch Kahana, is the son of far-right-wing politician Meir Kahana, who was assassinated in 1990 by an Egyptian-born U.S. citizen.
It can be miraculous, and it can be any day. It will take a lot of convincing, of course, try to convince the people, but we'll go.
In previous years, this event and other reenactments took place in Jerusalem, close to the Temple Mount. But due to several obstacles, such as density and police disapproval, this ceremony moved here to Mitzpeh, Jericho, in the Judean desert, close to the Palestinian city of Jericho, and around 20 kilometers away from Jerusalem. A huge altar was built here, which resembles, in a way, the Jewish temple altar used for sacrifices. The event also included shearing of sheep.
In the army, we always do what's called dry before wet, without ammunition and then with ammunition. So just like that, we also are doing exercises of the Kohanim that aren't real yet, but it's to practice and so that we know how to conduct ourselves and how to do everything that we need to do when we have our home Beit HaMikdash.
Practicing and reenacting ancient processions as well as praying on the Temple Mount is a controversial issue, even in the Jewish Orthodox world, since the site is holy to both Jews and Muslims. But participants in this event defend their actions.
According to our tradition, the whole world was created from the Temple Mount, from the foundation stone, Adam. So it's very obvious that everybody, not only Jews, want to come back from the place they were created. It's the most holy place in the world. And us as Jews, we have a very long tradition on the Temple Mount from Noah and Abraham and Isaac, and later on King David and King Solomon, and the first temple and the second temple. And that's the essence of our being.
Despite the many challenges, participants of this unique ceremony hope to continue their tradition, which now includes only a few dozen people.
Now that
Yeah.
I'm reading way into the text on that. I'm just looking at this from like a pragmatic standpoint. Like, you know, aside from what the two witnesses are going to do, where do they come into this picture? How do people recognize right off the bat that they're the two witnesses, especially Jews that aren't Christians and haven't read Revelation? So I don't know. That's just things that are going to happen after we're gone, and these are just kind of best guesses at this point.
So you don't think it's going to be a 30-year gap like some people think? I just think that's way too long.
No, that's way too long. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don Koenig, who I read for years and years, and I really loved his work. And I don't mean to say in the past tense. I think he's quit writing for now, but he believed it was about a 10-year gap, or it could be up to a 10 or 11-year gap. So
that just seems so long. Because
that
things just
even,
change so rapidly.
That
you know?
seemed even too long for me.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I do agree there's going to be some form of a gap. I'm not going to be here for the gap, but I guess in my mind, I'm just thinking, oh man, these people just need to get saved. Because I'm thinking my family, friends who I know are going to be left behind. But then again, that gap could be a good thing because nothing's going to be maybe totally taken offline, the Antichrist. So a gap is a good thing. And then I'm just like, I just wish the show would get on the road, because honestly, so I was going to read some parts, but I'm actually going to skip to the second part here. And I want to just quote, if you don't mind, this is on page 100. So I don't know if you're following along in the notes that I provided, but again, the book is, the layout, guys, here's the book again, in case anyone just forgot. It's called The Disappearing. The layout of this book is very interesting. And I know you had said before about the gap and the different sections. I didn't want to get into that because you do mention that with different countries merging together. So I don't want to talk about that. But the way that you guys laid out this book is really interesting. So in this one particular part, it's kind of like this Q&A, right? These people that ask questions. So I have two great nieces. I have a 10-year-old great niece and a 5-year-old. So soon to be, I think Jada will be 11 in December. And I really struggle with the kids as far as the age of accountability. And when I heard you on Jan, you had said a certain age, which I'm not going to say. And I was like, oh no, that's too old. Because I would feel because even before we started recording this show, I told you my little story, how I was 5, I kind of knew. But so my question to you, Pete, would be this. We understand the age of accountability is not mentioned verbatim in the Bible, right? It doesn't say at the age of 13, thou knowest everything. Yeah. But I believe that when a child can fully understand the consequences of whatever their sin, right? Let's just call it what it is. I guess why I struggle with it is I would hope and pray that my niece, who is soon to be 11, she's nearing that age of, does she really know right from wrong, truly and honestly? So I'm going to allow you to speak upon this. But before I do that, on page 100, someone had asked a question, and I have never thought about this. I know that I've read it time and time again, and it says, they were talking about kids here, but won't there be children in the tribulation? Jesus says so in his Olivet discourse. And then you give an answer, which I'm not going to read. So yes, there's definitely going to be kids in the tribulation. However, I want you to talk about both. I want you to talk about when the rapture happens, I know we said kids before. So I know what age that you said on Jan. So expound upon that and how you got there. And then also during the tribulation, what's going to happen to these kids? Because if you think about it, they're all going to perish at 7. I mean, they're only going to make it until 7 years old. So just expound upon both of those, rapture and then during the tribulation.
Okay. So I am probably the only one that holds to an age this old because I have not heard anybody else talk about it. But like you said, the Bible doesn't come out and say that there is no specific age of accountability. So
right.
I believe in what they call the law of first mention. So the first time something is mentioned in the Bible, there is significance to that. There is weight behind that particular mention. So the first time that a Hebrew is mentioned in the Bible is Abraham, and that was in Genesis 12, I believe, or maybe it's 14. But early in the Bible, the first guy that's ever called a Hebrew. The first question that's asked, right, is Satan asking, did God really say? So there's significance behind the first time things are mentioned. So the first time that there is a mention of an age associated with accountability is in Exodus 30, 11 through 16, where they're crossing over into the wilderness, and God tells Moses to enact a ransom tax for their souls. And I'll read the passage to you because
Please,
I don't want to misquote it. And I'm reading from the New King James. And excuse me, drop my little ruler here. It says in verse 11, then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, when you take the census of the children of Israel for their numbers, then every man shall give a ransom for himself to the Lord. And when you number them, there may be no plague among them when you number them. This is what everyone among those who numbered shall give: half a shekel according to the shekel of the sanctuary. And in parentheses, then it says a shekel is 20 gerahs. And the half shekel shall be an offering to the Lord. Everyone included among those who are numbered from 20 years old and above shall give an offering to the Lord. So the first time that we see this idea of a ransom tax for their souls, the age is given as 20. Now, by the time Moses wrote this, and by the time this is happening, lifespans had been normalized, right? So, before Genesis, before the flood, people were living for hundreds and hundreds of years. And even afterwards, there's folks that were living for, multiple centuries. But by the time Moses, lifespans had become fairly normalized, standardized, if you will, to 70 to 80 years, right? So at 20 years of age is where this accountability begins. And then when you read all through the books of Moses, you can't join the military until you're over the age of 20. You can't serve in the temple until you're 30. I mean, there's they associate ages for different things. Right. But then when you go into Numbers, Numbers talks about those that could go into the promised land, again, under the age of 20. Now, did everybody under the age of 20, believe the good report from Joshua and Caleb? I don't know. It doesn't say. It says that there's a cutoff, and there's no rhyme or reason given to that other than this cutoff that this generation is going to be able to go into the promised land. Now, so that's part one. Part two is fast forward thousands of years. We have our modern age we live in now, and we've discovered things about the brain in modern science and modern medicine that the brain is made up into different sections. And one of those sections is the prefrontal cortex, which doesn't fully get developed until about the 20s or early 20s. Now, that doesn't mean that's not to say that your brain doesn't continue to grow over the course of your life, because it does. Especially if you're going to school or you're taking on new careers or new challenges, things like that, your mind is going to continue to grow and develop. But by the age of 20, you're at that stage where you're able to form, like a worldview, because it's based off of your experiences, it's based off of your education, and now you're able to begin to have critical thought. And that's where that prefrontal cortex is critical, in that we are now able to make these kind of decisions. Now, I got saved at the age of 6. I walked the aisle. I gave my life to the Lord, but obviously I didn't understand everything there was to understand about salvation or Christianity or anything. And I always believe that God defaults to save those who seek him out. And whether you're 6-year-old walking the aisle, or you're 3 years old clinging on to a picture of Jesus, or you're a drunk laying in the gutter on your last breath and you cry out to God, God's going to save you. He defaults to save those that seek him.
Yeah.
Now, the reason I associate the age of accountability with being much older, probably around the age of 20, is not that people can't determine right or wrong, because they can, even at the age of, 7, 8, 9, 10. My son knows it's wrong to hit his sister, but he'll do it anyways because he can't think about the consequences, and he doesn't. And that's the big thing, is they're not able to reconcile the actions with consequences. And so I have a hard time believing, at least even from scripture, because nobody has shown me any other age that there is, that God would create us in such a way that our brain doesn't fully develop until a particular age range, but then hold you accountable for making eternal decisions prior to that, when your brain is not even fully developed. Now, we don't even consider adults in our modern age adults until they're 18. They can't vote. They're not, they can't be judged the same way in a criminal court. If you're 17 and you get charged with a murder versus if you're 18 and you get charged with a murder, there's going to be two different standards that are going to be applied to you. Now, if we can do that as fallen, faulty humans, how much more perfect is God's judgment than ours? So
exactly.
Here's where I'm cautious in this. I'm not saying that we shouldn't witness to anybody under the age of 20. I'm not saying that 18-year-olds can't go out and do horrendous things, because they can, and they do, and even younger.
Yeah.
The Columbine shooters, the kid that just shot up school in the Uvalde, Texas. Kids can do horrific things, but I think that because teenagers are also going through puberty, they're going through transitions where their emotions and their biology is just all over the board. Emotionally, I think there's so many challenges with trying to put the age at what church has traditionally put at like, say, 13. We put it at the age of 13 because of the bar mitzvah, which is not in the Bible. And it's not, the age 13 is not even in the Bible. It's just something that's culturally come along with Judaism and kind of been adopted by the Christian church as kind of an age to go with. But
and I've heard 12, because that's when Jesus was first in the synagogue.
Yeah. And, obviously Jesus is the exception to the norm. He is not the norm. I mean,
he's not the norm.
A normal 12-year-old would have been ran out of there, just like, get out of here, kid,
Yeah.
But Jesus was obviously the exception. So, and here's the other thing too, or there's two more points. One is that, when we talk about the exception versus the norm, in Hebrews, it says that, every man's appointed to die and then judgment. Well, then or die once and then judgment. Well, then people will say, what about Lazarus? Lazarus died and then he was resurrected and then he died a second time. Obviously, there are going to be exceptions, because where Paul, Peter, Jesus are resurrecting people, these are very unique events. These are not the normal processes for humanity. So that you can't just say that just because Jesus, and I'm not saying you, I'm just saying in general, we can't say Jesus because Jesus was in the temple at 12, that every 12-year-old should understand this. I mean, obviously that's a faulty view. The second point is that when we read through the prophetic texts, whether it's in the Olivet Discourses, when I say courses, I mean Matthew, Mark, and Luke's versions of the Olivet Discourse.
Yeah.
And we read through Revelation, there's no mention of children there. There are mention in Matthew's Olivet Discourse of babies in the womb, and then those that are nursing, but no children running around the streets,
Correct.
There's no mention of those things, of teenagers even per se. So I think that there are the reason this is different than, and I told this to Jan, the reason that there's a difference between why God doesn't allow children to go into the tribulation. I don't care if their parents are Christians or not. I think God is going to default to take these children.
Agreed. 100% agree.
It's because if you're at the age of, let's just say that you're 7 when the rapture happens. Let's say there's a couple of years gap. And so by the time you're 11, 12, 13, and your parents force you to take the mark, and you have to take it. And then when you get to Revelation, it says there's no exceptions. If you take the mark, you're going to the lake of fire forever.
Yeah.
I find that incredibly unjust, and it seems very out of keeping with God's nature. And I know God is wholly sovereign, and I know that He is wholly just and holy altogether. I have a hard time reconciling that with what we know from Scripture about His nature versus these little scenarios that we try and create, like, can God make a rock that's too big to move? I mean, these are to me, they're nonsensical, because why would God put you in that position? And that's why Christians aren't there. Yeah. Christians aren't there in that same exact scenario because a Christian that is born again, sealed by the Holy Spirit, becomes a new creation in Christ, then takes the mark. That's contradictory to Scripture, and it creates this paradox that can't exist there.
Agreed. And the thing too with the whole Jesus thing and his age, that's why a lot of people say, oh, we're all going to be 33 when we're in heaven, because that's when Jesus ended his ministry. So same principle of him being 12 or 33. It's the same thing. So what I want to read here is on, were you done answering the question before I just move on?
I think I've beaten that horse.
We're good. Okay.
Good. Yeah.
So let me, so on page 127, I do want to read here, and I'm probably going to butcher some words here, but that's what I do best. So given our recent history of cause, effect reactions to global crises, world leaders will once again rush into another form of governmental control, this time through regional and technocratic, I did say that word right? Powers. This would be somewhat similar to how at his death, Alexander the Great's kingdom was divided amongst his 4 generals. Have at it with those words. Palahuma, how do you say those words?
Ptolemy.
And then Salacious?
Seleucid.
Hasidander? No.
Yeah, anyways.
And the other people, I don't know. Anyway, so the world would be parceled out amongst the remaining but weakened nations to form regional alliances, given the likely objections to technological powerhouses remaining within just one region. And you talked about Google, Amazon, and other powerful. So let me move down here a bit. It says, so we imagine that this is the only way this final world conglomeration will get full participation. The world will then break into 10 regions. And then, so I don't want you to go into full description on that, because this is basically a 2-part question. You talk about that, to the split of these nations coming together. And then on page 50, so I'm merging these two together for a reason. And then on page 150, you also talk about this little horn. So very briefly, merge in this governmental shift of all of these nations coming together, and then who exactly is a little horn, and what does that mean?
So even now we have this great rush to create a global government, and I think that they are rushing this Agenda 2030. They're rushing this Great Reset. They're rushing all of these things because they realize that the old order of things, based on this construct where the United States is the world's superpower, the US dollar is the world's reserve currency, all of the things that have been the norm for the last 70 years are now starting to fall apart. And they realize that. And they, Americans are trying to cling on to this idea that we can keep this thing going, but we are too far gone. Mm-hmm. So they have already constructed what a post-American world will look like. The Club of Rome did this. They were like this environmental think tank that basically augmented the United Nations back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Mm-hmm. But there's other groups that have come and thought through this. You have the rise of corporations like Google and Amazon and Apple and all these companies that are almost more powerful than nations themselves. Mm-hmm. Now they, I believe, will help form and augment. The United Nations will come together and say, we can't rule from New York City because at this point, the United States is in collapse mode / going into Mad Max territory. And it will be wholly infeasible or unfeasible to maintain operations from there. They're going to move that operations to the Middle East to be the center or the hub of where things are happening in the world. And I think that they've already constructed a 10-region area. Now, so the United States, our military, we have broken up the world into 7 areas, commands, we call them commands. So like Army North falls under NORTHCOM, Northern Command. So everything from Mexico North is Northern Command. SOUTHCOM, Southern Command, is everything from like Central America countries down into South America. AFRICOM, obviously, is all of Africa. CENTCOM is all of the Middle East. EUCOM is Europe and parts of Russia. And then PACOM is going to be the Pacific Command. So we've done this. I know that there's other entities out there, global entities that are looking at the world post-United States, and they've already divided up. So they have their regions set up. And let's just say for all intents and purposes that this is 10 regions. There's going to be 10 people assigned to these things. Now, I don't think that these guys, these 10 kings will be primarily political leaders. They'll become political leaders, but they're not going to start from politics, because governments don't create anything. They create laws, and they're administrative in nature. But you have these tech titans, these titans of industry who are kings of whatever they build, these kingdoms. And I use an example like Elon Musk or whoever that understand fundamentally how to make things work. And I think these guys come together and they're appointed these leadership roles. And some of them will be politicians. I can see like Justin Trudeau and Macron and some of the other kind of World Economic Forum type guys jumping in to kind of take over certain areas. But one of these guys will be the one that rises up, this little horn. He will be the 11th guy that rises up, and he subdues 3. He ends up taking over 3 of these kingdoms, and then he kind of takes the majority at this point. Now, I think that as the United States collapses, Europe will ascend. And this is very much not a popular view amongst think tanks and people that are in the know.
You've had quite a few of those today, so bring it on again for another one. You've kept me on my toes.
Yeah, so they all see kind of Russia and China ascending and forming their version of a new world order. But I think that Europe will ascend. I think NATO will disband, and I think that they'll restructure NATO, and it'll become this European defense force. So right now, NATO is like an outline for a book. It has all of the chapters. It has everything that's organized, but it doesn't really have any authority to do anything without the United States. NATO is already gone.
Right.
But they've recognized, even going back to 2017, that NATO, that they want to have, if the EU is going to be the super state that they want to be, they need their own military. They need something that's not subservient to the United States, the whims of the United States. And so I think with the collapsing of Afghanistan, the mission there, and the fact that we didn't tell anybody ahead of time, hey, we're pulling everybody out. It was kind of like this mad scramble. That between that and this fiasco with Ukraine and Russia, I think it's really shown the weakness of NATO as it is constructed now. So I think NATO will be restructured. All of those generals and colonels and leaders there will be kind of rewrapped up into this new European Defense Force, and they will begin to launch this new, we would look at it and say revived Roman Empire, but they just say, hey, this was a European superstate, and that's what's going to be this rising power. So I think that this Antichrist will come out of that, and somehow he's able to subdue these other 3 kings, these other 3 rulers. Yeah, and he'll end up having the majority. Like, when Elon Musk bought 9% of Twitter's stock, he became the single biggest stockholder and therefore the most important, right? Yeah. This Antichrist will somehow take enough power to where he has the majority now of the say, and then he just kind of keeps from there. He just kind of runs with it, and then he takes over everything. So Little Horn, I know I've mentioned that a few times on my podcast as well. I think people have a misconception really of who the Antichrist is. I feel like they think it's going to be a Barack Obama, Donald Trump, certainly not a Joe Biden, but someone powerful and strong and big. But I'm like, no, that's not really what the Bible says. They call him a little horn. So I take that as this is someone who is, I believe, because I'm there in your camp too, I believe it's soon. So I'm in the camp. I believe that if we are raptured right now, the Antichrist, I do believe, and the false prophet are on the scene right now. But we may have even watched them on television for all we know. We don't know. But the Antichrist, correct me if I'm wrong, but the little horn means he's not, I don't want to say a nobody, but he really comes out of the shadows. Is that right? Am I wrong? Yeah, no, that's right. And just like a good...
So it's not Donald Trump or Barack Obama.
No, I don't think so. I don't think no.
So yeah.
No, and in fact, if you look back at World War I, there was a young German private named Adolf Hitler who was injured in the war. He was a nobody. He was a nobody in World War I, and he became a house painter. And then he became a radical. And it wasn't until the late 1920s when Germany was in really, really bad economic situation that he was able to gain traction, gain followers. And he had folks that were propping him up. And so Adolf Hitler in World War I was a nobody. Yeah. And you wouldn't have known that then. Nobody would have seen him coming until he was right on the threshold of taking power. So this same Antichrist, this guy's alive today. And then you have now with the possibility of Pope Francis resigning for health issues or whatever, who I never thought Pope Francis was the guy in the false prophet anyways, because I just said he's too old. He's too old. I think whoever this next guy is,
Mm-hmm.
especially if he's young, if he's a younger man, say in his 60s or late 50s, I think, man, that he's got to be it. Now, if he's
So you think the Pope is? See, because I differ on that. I think the false prophet is definitely Jewish. And I'm brought to Kabbalah, like I'm brought to that spiritualism.
Yeah.
Because to me, they have to sell. And that's the thing. They don't have to sell the Gentile Antichrist, because I've spoken to many non-Messianic Jews, as I'm sure you have. Their Messiah does not have to be Jewish. And people think that he does. And no, they will accept a Gentile Messiah. But I don't know. The only reason with the Pope is then I have a lot of Catholic friends who are still going to be deceived. I'm like, I don't want that to happen. So,
well, I think the reason I lean toward the Pope is just kind of what they've been doing since the 60s, where they've been trying to really push hard on ecumenism and trying to get all of these religions to come together. Yeah. And with Chrislam and with everything that Pope John Paul did, they are leading the charge in this. And so the church, Satan at this point, he's got to know that he has a very limited window of time to do what he's got to do. And I think that he's gonna take what he has with the majority, the biggest Christian organization in the world. I say, air quotes Christian, is the Roman Catholic Church with 1 billion adherents to it worldwide. So I think he is going to take advantage of that. And since they are so far gone in terms of trying to unite over even strong Catholics, Orthodox Catholics are like, man, this Francis guy, he is out there. Like they are scratching their head like, man, he is not good. So
like too liberal.
Yeah. And so even they are having a hard time with how far left he's pushed the Roman Catholic Church. So I think that they're the largest entity right now in the world. And they have already tried to make inroads with the second largest religion, which is Islam.
Yeah,
so I think I think that it makes sense
and that might be a really good bridge. Yeah. So let me ask you, and this totally has nothing to do with what we're talking about at all right now. But so do you think that that's why? Because whether people agree with me or disagree, that's not the point. But I just did a very long, extensive study on The Chosen, and I broke everything down from episodes to the cast to Dallas Jenkins to the music to the consultants. So with all that being said, Catholicism is like what you just said. It has this push right now. You're talking about Mark Wahlberg, who's pushing Catholicism, like, his sons and, get closer to the Lord. Then you have this Hallow app that is become really, really popular. And then, of course, none other than Jonathan Rumi, who plays Jesus, is a Catholic. Then you also have this, Jonathan Rumi is really close with Russell Brand. Russell Brand is a huge New Age person, but also has a lot of undertones, mysticism, and Catholicism. So I do see this huge push of Catholic is really, really good right now, and we're banning Nancy Pelosi, and she can't do this. So I guess, I'm teetering. My friend Chris. So Chris, if you're watching, he was on we did a recording. We kind of talked about it. I'm on the fence on it only because I'm so sold out right now. A Gentile Antichrist and a Jewish false prophet. But I don't know. And does that mean Jewish, or could he be of Jewish descent? You never know. The Pope, could he not be of a bloodline of someone Jewish? So
you could, and that's how you may sell it.
I guess but I know I'm not going to be here, but I hope we get to see something from heaven. I want to know. Yeah. And I don't think Elon Musk is the Antichrist. So for anyone who's asked me that question, no, I don't trust Elon Musk, but he's certainly not the Antichrist. So I know we're running out of time here. So there's a few things that I want to go over before we end, because I want you to bring in it for a landing. And I want to read this because you had said on page 251, and I quote, so this is from the Appendix A. This is actually by you here. Quote, somebody recently asked me to explain why God uses seals, trumpets, and bowls as the symbols for the earth's final judgment. Since no one had ever asked me that before, I found it intriguing and worthy of investigation. So I'm going to stop there. And I don't want you to go through everything, of course, because again, we want people to purchase the book. That was an amazing question. So why does God, really, really quick, why does he use seals, trumpets, and bowls, or in other versions, it's called vials? Why does he use these things?
Well, I think, just to make it as simple as possible. I mean, these are things that are familiar to every age, right? If God had said, or if it had said in Revelation, I'm going to use this app and this thing and this thing that are only unique to our generation. Obviously, the first 20 centuries, nobody would know what that meant.
Right.
So he's using these very common symbols that make sense to the most people, that every culture could recognize. That's simple.
That's perfect. Okay, so that's why he's using those, right?
Yeah. I
Okay.
think that's exactly why he's using those.
Okay, I thought you were going to say more. I was hanging on, but okay, we're great. Okay, so I want to read from my notes here, and I just want to take some time to read this, and then I'm going to dive into what you have said here on page 259. So I love my mom. Mom, I love you, but she's always said to me, and she is a born again believer, but ever since I really have always been, I always say rededicate. I'm so afraid of these Christianese words. Everyone thinks I'm a lordship person every time I use something out of context. So when I rededicated my life back to the Lord, when the prodigal came home, which again, people butcher that and say, Kim, that's not even what it means. But listen, it means that to me. So I was a prodigal that came home to the Lord. And ever since then, I have dove into prophecy big time. And God has kept me here for 12 years now. So anyway, I've always heard her say, Kim, we've had wars, earthquakes, everything has been happening. It's been happening forever, right? And she's true, right? That's right. Since the 20s, 30s, and so on and so forth, we've always had earthquakes and wars and such and such. But I wanted to do a little research on my own. And I'm like, I want to debunk her one day so she can stop telling me this. And the one key thing that I wanted to hone in on is, yes, we've had the earth shake. We've had wars, World War I and II. We've had famines and pestilence, but we've never had live streaming. And in order for anyone to read in the book of Revelation some of the things that we read, when it says the whole world, well, back in the 20s, 30s, 40s, even 70s, you couldn't watch everything. So I want to read here. Because if I don't, I'm going to digress. Just a short 27 years ago, the very first live stream was used. In 1995, it was a live stream of a baseball game between, which I don't watch sports anymore, but my favorite team, the Yankees and the Mariners. So that was 1995. In 2008, YouTube was the leader in live streaming and made it really what it is today. The first live stream was streamed live from San Francisco and Tokyo at the same time and featured interviews and performances. And oddly enough, there was a Q&A with Barack in 2010. And then in 2011, Twitch.tv came out, but this platform was only used for video games. Now, a short 7 years ago, Twitter started Periscope. And in 2015, Facebook and Instagram started to get on board. And in 2016, they started their live streaming. So these are some facts that I found out about live streaming. By 2018, more than 3.5 million live streams were hosted on Facebook. At the end of 2019, users all over the world watched more than 1.1 billion, yes, guys, a billion with a B, hours of live videos. Today, live streaming is one of the most prominent forms of marketing, communication, and entertainment. And modern times require modern solutions. That is a quote, and I don't remember where I got it from because I have quotes. So sorry for whoever I'm plagiarizing. That's where Restream.io comes into play. So this particular service allows for live streaming simultaneously to multiple platforms, including YouTube Live, Facebook Live, Twitch, and it lists a whole bunch of things. So yeah, I'm quoting from somewhere, but I don't know where. So continuing to quote, in 2020, the company released Restream Studio, a simple yet powerful live streaming tool that allows users to multi-stream directly from their browsers, invite guests on streams, read and reply viewer messages from different platforms in one place. I'm going to skip down a little bit on my notes. In the year 2020, the world faced something it has never faced before. I'm still continuing to quote from the same article. Something petrifying, the global COVID-19 pandemic. Although the whole global economy received a stunning blow, this blew my mind. Live streaming, on the contrary, encountered new opportunities because all of the lockdowns all over the world, many people were forced to work from their homes. And in the fall of 2020, as many as 52% of students attended school virtually. I want to read this very quickly from Revelation chapter 11, 7 through 13. When they have finished their testimony, this is referring to the two witnesses in Jerusalem, the beast that comes up out of the abyss will make war with them and overcome them and kill them. And their dead bodies will lie in the street of the great city, which mystically is called Sodom and Egypt, where also their Lord was crucified. Those from the peoples and tribes and tongues and nations will look at their dead bodies for 3.5 days. So there, to me, is showing it's global, and will not permit their dead bodies to be laid in a tomb. And those who dwell on the earth will rejoice over them and celebrate, and they will send gifts to one another, because these two prophets tormented those who dwell on the earth. And then this is the key. But after 3.5 days, the breath of life from God came into them. They stood on their feet, and great fear fell upon those who were watching them. And then they were raptured because they heard the voice come up here. So I said all of that, Pete, to say this. On page 259, there's so many nuggets here on living in biblical times. So I want, again, guys, you have to go out and get this book. Okay. I wanted to go into so much more, but I can't because you need to buy it. So my family member, thank you again for buying this book already. It's phenomenal, but we've always said we lived in last time. So okay, why are we here now, Pete? What's any different from now from 1925? Well, what's the difference?
Well, I think I wrote an article called "Prophetic Red Lines," and these are things that are Rubicons, if you will. They're points of no return once you cross them. And we have so many. I mean, I listed 10 things on there and I could have probably listed 30 things or 40 things that we've crossed. But the big one, the mother of all prophetic red lines, is that we have Israel back in the land again for the first time in almost 2,000 years. They're not just back in the land. They resurrected their language, their culture, their dietary laws. All of those things associated with Judaism have come back into fold, to the point now that they're ready to build their third temple and are really kind of chomping at the bit to do that. They've got everything ready, the materials, the stones, even the priests are getting ready. So I think we're at that threshold now. The second thing is, as you said, is technology. We've gone through the first industrial revolution, the second, third. Now we're moving into the fourth, which is really kind of merging the cyber into the physical. That's where at that point now where technology is starting to move into the human body or to the brain, and trying to link the brain to external technologies and even to satellites and phones and things like that. So obviously, when we look at things that are technologies mentioned in the Revelation, such as the mark of the beast and what you talked there about the two witnesses being live streamed, and everybody in the world will be able to see them stand up on the third day. That those are technologies that never existed in any other generation, not even 20 years ago. Yeah. So that's another aspect of where we are in terms of a red line. Another red line is obviously the crises are now global. Where in the past, even World War I, really that war was kind of limited to over there. Back here in the United States, people really didn't care because it didn't really impact them unless somebody they knew personally went over there and served. Even World War II, to a lesser extent, was over there. But now all of these challenges that are starting to happen are happening everywhere. COVID was all over the world. The economic crises are all over the world. Climate change, man-made climate change, these crises, and whether they're real or they're are being artificially generated to make them crises, they're still being thrust upon the whole world. And so all of these things now are taking on this global kind of aspect to it, whereas in the past the nations were separated and were kept apart, so that these problems were isolated to just individual nations. Now it's all nations got to pitch in. Everybody's got to join together. And we just had a scare a few weeks ago with the WHO, with that treaty where they were wanting to cede every country cede their authority, their medical authority over to the World Health Organization. And thankfully that didn't happen, but that's coming. It's not going to, that agenda is not going to drop off. It's just going to be set aside for a moment. They're going to reshuffle it. They're going to rename it, rebrand it, and it's going to come back. So a good example of that would be like the Homeland Terrorism omnibus bill that Joe Biden and I want to say it was Ted Daschle back in the 90s wrote. They wrote it in 95, and they couldn't get it into Congress because it was so draconian and so Orwellian in terms of how it was going to impact our rights and stuff. And right after they pushed it, it didn't happen. Then we had the Oklahoma City bombing, right? And then they still couldn't get it in. So, but 6 years later, we had 9/11, and they took that same bill, they renamed it changed some of the dates on there, and they called it the Patriot Act, and it was passed into law within 30 days. So this WHO treaty that's coming is going to come back, and they're going to wait for the right crisis. They're going to generate another crisis that's going to happen, and then it's going to have enough global sympathy and global support to get it pushed. And that's one example, right? I mean, so we've already had 3 or 4 examples. And now there is also these other red lines that are crossing with the UFOs, and it used to be that you have fringe groups that were talking about it. You had even secret classified military programs trying to deal with it, but now it's all out in the open. Not just our government, but our governments around the world are starting to bring these out to the open and talk about this and track it. And so this is a phenomenon that science can't explain. And another thing is with CERN and with these hadron colliders. I think there's more than one. I think China's got one, and Europe's got one, and I think there's a smaller one in Tennessee. And they're smashing atoms together. They're doing all these things, and eventually they're going to get to the point where they're going to be able to open something. They're going to be they're trying to open doorways. Dimensional doorways, and for them, from their standpoint, this is going to solve a lot of problems. They're going to be able to. They're trying to develop a teleportation, and think about the benefits of that. So if you're a country A, and you want to go invade country Z, and instead of having to ship people, trucks, ships, planes, weapons from this port all the way over to this port. I mean, how painful that could be when you could teleport all that just from the point, you step into this thing and you're already in that country. So there will definitely be a weapons application tried. They're trying to do this for military reasons, obviously. But then you have artificial intelligence. There's so many things going on right now that we can't undo. We can't undo learning artificial intelligence any more than we can undo creating the internet or making weapons or guns or bullets or the nuclear bomb. I mean, that technology is already out there. That information is out there. People can recreate it very easily. So we've crossed all kinds of red lines to the point now where I just think that there's really nothing left to happen other than the rapture. So
agreed. Maybe tonight. All right. So I want to end on a nice, encouraging, positive note. I do know that there's some Christians who, we're living in trying times with the debauchery. We're in Gay Pride Month right now, and just lawlessness, the agenda of our kids, just everything around us seems so wicked and vile and lawless. But we read in Titus chapter 2, verse 13, right? For our blessed hope. And so I know I cling to that scripture, but why, I guess how I want you to end this, Pete, is twofold. Encourage the believer as to why they really need to believe in a pre-trib rapture. What's the point of that? So encourage them on that. And then let's just say someone listening to, I call it LCP. So Life Clips, LCP, is listening to this and they don't know the Lord. So first question is encouragement to the believer. The second part is going to be, what would you say to the unbeliever? And then just take time for closing remarks, and then we'll close it up because I know you have to get back to the fam and the kids and the dogs and everything else. So.
Yeah, I'm just quoting from 2 Peter 2, 6-8. It says, "In God turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, condemned them to destruction, making them an example to those afterward who would live ungodly, and delivered righteous Lot, who was oppressed by the filthy conduct of the wicked. For that righteous man dwelling among them tormented his righteous soul from day to day by seeing and hearing their lawless deeds." And I think that we are modern day Lots. We're living in this world that's increasingly becoming just lawless. It's really the best word for it. We're living in perilous times.
Yeah.
And this is this point in time for us to shine the brightest. I mean, things are getting dark in the world. And if you look at guys like Bill Maher and other, folks that we would have considered, 5-10 years ago, very liberal, even they today are starting to seem more because they haven't moved. They haven't changed positions. Bill Maher is now, he seems to be almost conservative, and you get conservatives cheering him on because he's saying common sense things that that we've always been saying, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Especially about transgenderism and all that. But he has never changed. He's been the same position. But what's happening is that his party, his group of folks are continuing to move further and further left. And he's looking at them like, where you guys have lost your mind, right? And they're still moving to move to the left.
Yeah.
So that's an example of a liberal, non-Christian, non-believer that's very prominent in the news, just as an example of how far things have shifted. And I think that as things continue to shift left, they get darker, the times get darker. But as we just continue to be believers in Jesus Christ and continue to hold to our Christian faith, we are going to stand brighter and brighter and brighter. And as long as we don't hide that, like the old kids song, hide your candle under a bushel. As long as we don't hide that candle and we don't pretend to fit in with the world, we're going to stand out. And that's a good thing. And we need to be the salt and the light for the time remaining. For the unbeliever, the world that's coming ahead, the times that are coming ahead is going to be incredibly horrific. And I don't mean to undersell this. And I think that many churches do their congregations a disservice by not discussing how serious and how horrifically terrible this time is going to be. Over the course of human history, and I'm being fairly conservative here, but I want to say it was somewhere around 500 million people have died due to war and conflict. 500 million from today going back to, the first wars between the Chaldeans and the Assyrians or whoever, 2 billion people are going to die in the first 4 seal judgments. That's, 4 times the amount are going to die in just a few short years. And that's just the seal judgments. When you get to the trumpet, so that's a quarter of the world's population. You get to the trumpet judgment, a third. So if you have a quarter of the world population dying, that leaves 75% of the world population left. Now you take a 75% and you cut that into a third, another third of that's going to die, right? And so by the time you get to Armageddon, the world's population is going to be dwindling down significantly, and not just conflicts between men to men and the Antichrist and his forces killing martyrs and things like that. There are going to be horrific supernatural judgments that are happening on the earth and things that people are not going to be able to escape from. It's going to be a very terrible time. And the biggest tragedy is that non-believers today, they don't have to go through it. They don't have to go into that time period. All they have to do is place their faith on Jesus Christ, on his finished work on the cross, and ask for forgiveness and ask him to be the Lord of their life. And they can have that salvation as long as they do it with a sincere heart and they earnestly are seeking God. Anybody that calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. It says that in Romans 10. That's a promise there. So that there is great hope in every day that we live and every day that we have remaining. But the rapture is coming very quickly, and I think very, very soon. Yeah. I don't want to say when, but I think that it's sooner than people expect. And for folks like us, we're watchers. We're watching the world. We're seeing the signs. We're very attuned to what's going on. I think that most of the world is not. They don't care. They don't. Does not register on their importance priorities at any level. So it is going to catch the world off guard, and that's the real tragedy.
It is. All right. Well, listen, Pete, you have been a pleasure. So guys, listen, this book again, please go out and get it. The Disappearing Terry James, and Pete right here, my special guest. Again, honored to have you on here, brother. Seriously. Really, I cannot, I don't want to say praise this book enough, but just everything. And even for what you said, even the story in the middle of this book, everything about it was captivating from beginning to end. I took notes throughout it. There was so much more that I wanted to dive into, but we just didn't have time here today. But I want to thank you again from the depths of my being for being here, taking time out. But on that note, listen, brother, as I always say on my Facebook, well, I've stopped doing it for a while, but I always do maybe today's or maybe tonight's. So maybe tonight. And I always end my podcast with see you here, there, or in the air. So it's a pleasure. Have an amazing evening. And thank you again for coming on Life Clips. I appreciate it. And guys, go out and buy the book. Buy it. All right. You have a great night.
You too.
All right. Bye. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. To find out more information, go to lifeclipspodcast.com. Would you like to be a guest on our show? Do you have questions, comments, or concerns? Send an email to questions@lifeclipspodcast.com. Until next time, family, I will see you here, there, or in the air.
Titus chapter 2, verse 13, looking for the blessed hope and the appearing of the glory of our great God and Savior, Christ Jesus.